But we are here today to talk about the Coalition's plans to ensure that Australians get much faster, much better, much more affordable access to broadband services in the years ahead. Our modern lives are absolutely unimaginable without access to broadband technology. I couldn't do my job without access to broadband technology. Teachers, nurses, business people, people at home, millions and millions of Australians are using broadband every single day, and it's important that they get better broadband services than they are currently getting under this government. We believe in a national broadband network, and we will deliver a better national broadband network faster and more affordably than this government possibly can. Under the Coalition, by 2016, that's to say at the end of the first term of an incoming Coalition government, there will be minimum download speeds of 25 megabits and up to 100. So we will deliver a minimum of 25 megabits, 5 times average download speeds by the end of our first term. By the end of our second term, should we get one, by 2019, the vast majority of households will get access to 50 megabits or 10 times current speeds. We will be able to do this because we will build fibre to the node, and that eliminates 2/3 of the cost. So we will be able to do this for under $30 billion compared to the over $90 billion that it will cost the national broadband network. We'll also be able to do it that much more quickly because fibre to the node can be rolled out that much more quickly and that much more simply than fibre to the premises. There'll also be 3 important inquiries under the Coalition. The first will be a commercial review. It'll be completed within 60 days as to how quickly the national broadband network can meet our objectives. The second will be an audit of how Labor's national broadband network got into the current mess. The third will be an independent study of our telecommunications needs and in particular our broadband needs for the future, and this will include a cost-benefit analysis of the Coalition's national broadband network. I'm very proud of this policy. I am confident that it gives Australians what we need, and I want to pay tribute to Malcolm Turnbull and his team. This is a very comprehensive piece of analysis. As you'll see as you go through the 3 documents that we launched today, particularly the background paper, a lot of work has been done. It's very high quality work indeed. It's work of a quality to surpass just about anything that an opposition has previously done. I want to thank Malcolm and I now want to hand to him to elaborate on the policy today.
Good, thank you. I think I'll slip over. Good. Well, as Tony has said, our commitment is to deliver very fast broadband to all Australians sooner, cheaper and more affordably. Let me just talk about sooner first. It's all very well for Labor to talk about very fast broadband, but they are failing to deliver it. Their project is a failing project. They said in 2010 that they would pass 1.3 million premises with fibre by June 30 this year. Then in August last year, not very long ago, they revised all that and they said, oh no, it's only going to be 340,000 premises. Now, when it became apparent that they'd passed less than 100,000 premises at the end of last year, they said, oh, well, it's going slow. We now think we'll only do about 190 to 220,000 premises by June 30. Incredibly, the project has been making less progress since January 1 this year than it was in the 6 months up to December 31 last year. So this project, far from ramping up, is ramping down. It is a failing project. It is also one that is going to cost a huge amount of money. Now, as you'll see, we've made a number of very conservative, very reasonable assumptions about what this project is more likely to take in terms of dollars and in terms of time. And our estimate, the estimate that flows from that, is that this project will require total funding from the government of $94 billion. That is a staggering amount of money. And remember, the government has no idea how much it will cost. They've never set a limit on it. They haven't given this project a budget. They haven't said you've got $20 billion or $10 billion and that's all you've got to work with. They've said, we'll pay whatever it costs. So just let us know how much it'll cost from time to time. It's about as crazy as going off to build a house without getting a quote from the builder and just saying, oh, just send me an invoice every month and I'll fix you up. That's a way to get fleeced, obviously, and that is what is happening here. So what we've looked at is the experience around the world. We've done the hard analysis that the government never did. We've looked at what telcos and governments are doing in comparable markets, North America, in Europe, in Asia. And what we are presenting here is a plan that is consistent with the best practice around the world. And that will involve taking fibre to the premises in greenfield sites, in areas where there is very high demand, business centres, institutions, educational centres, hospitals, all of those places where there is high demand. But for the bulk of Australia's built-up areas, residential suburbs in other words, we'll be taking fibre out into the field, but not all the way into the customer's premise. And that saves about 3/4 at least of the cost. And the reason it saves so much money is because the cost of this network is not in the electronics or in the fibres or in the cables, it's in labour. It's very labour intensive, digging holes and trenches and getting guys into cherry pickers and digging, drilling holes in walls and all that sort of thing. So it's the civil works that rake up the cost here. So this is a much smarter approach. Now what this will deliver is speeds that are more than capable of delivering all of the services and applications households need. Because that's really the issue. It's not a question of what is your headline speed, it is what can you do with it. And the vast bulk, the majority, substantial majority of people in the fibre to the node footprint will receive 50 megabits or more and very high, that's very high speeds. We have said that at a minimum, the goal is the minimum to be 25 megs, but that will only be a minority. And we have not taken into account, because this has been a very conservative plan, vectoring, which can dramatically increase that. And I'm happy to take some questions on that later. So all of the assumptions we've made in this analysis have been conservative on looking at our proposal and, frankly, pretty generous to the government's. You could very legitimately make assumptions about the government's plan which would say it was going to cost a lot more and take even longer. Now, I want to just take you to some issues now about cost. The government is proposing that wholesale prices will treble over the next decade, and they are making extraordinary assumptions about the revenues that they will be able to generate for the NBN. This is one of their big flaws in their plan. They're assuming that Australians are going to pay a very substantially larger share of their household income, of GDP, however you measure it, for fixed line access. There's no evidence for that at all, no justification for that at all. If you combine a more realistic approach to pricing and a less expensive network to service, you can see that broadband costs are considerably lower under the coalition. Now, this is a critical point, because the biggest barrier to internet access is not technology, it's affordability. People in the lowest income percentages are far, far, far less likely to have access to the internet. You don't have to be a sociologist to work out why, it's because they can't afford it. So if you believe in everyone having internet access, you've got to make it affordable. Let me take you to the next slide. This gives you an idea of how dramatic the increase in the proposed NBN charges are compared over their plan, and this is all set out in their corporate plan and their submissions to the ACCC. Look at the ramp in their plan in red and compare that to the notorious increase in energy bills over the last decade. So you can see we're talking about a situation where we have been getting more broadband for less dollars for a long time, for a decade. Thanks to the Labor's NBN, apparently, this great benefit to the people, so they claim, we're going to see broadband costs take off through the roof. I mentioned earlier that the NBN Co has failed to meet all its targets. Well, there it is. That's what they said they would pass by fibre in 30 June 2013, as at December 2010. That's not so long ago. Then in August 2012, 6 months ago, they cut that right down to 340,000. And just a few weeks ago, they cut it down again to about 200,000. Their latest figure that they've released is less than 100,000. And we've got no reason to be confident they can get to that March 2013 forecast. Now, I mentioned earlier the point about speed. This is a very critical thing to recognise. Speed is only valuable to you insofar as you can use it for something. If you equip your house with 1 terabyte per second broadband speeds, the kind that a massive data centre might have, that'll cost you a fortune. You won't be able to do anything with it unless you dig up your garden and have the data centre there. So this is not our slide. This is from British Telecom's Openreach, and what they're demonstrating there is what can you do with a very standard broadband speed of 40 megs, which is higher than, is lower than what most of their customers can get. And as you can see, you've got multiple high-definition video streams. A high-definition video stream takes 6 megs. So you can have 3 of them. You can have multi-device browsing, so you can have, maybe you've got a big family and everyone's on their iPads, you know, engaging in all sorts of activities. You can have video chat, some gaming, and you've got plenty of spare capacity. This is a critical thing to remember. This is not, to put this in a rather geeky way, if you'll forgive me for this, the value or the utility of broadband does not increase in a linear fashion with the speed. In other words, 20 megabits per second is not twice as useful or valuable to you as 10, and 40 is certainly not twice as valuable to you as 20. So that's a critical point to understand. So this is not a question of Stephen Conroy has said, oh, you know, the government, this is not as good as the government's plan. This will deliver all of the services and applications Australians want and are prepared to pay for online, but it will do so sooner and cheaper. And that is why this approach is what's being taken around the world. Now, I just want to address one thing, before we go to questions. It's a point that Stephen Conroy raised earlier today. He said, what about areas where the copper is in very poor condition? Where the copper is in very poor condition, there are 2 approaches you can take. One is you can remediate it, fix it up, and that is something that is done all the time. And in an area, for example, where there is a lot of groundwater and the copper there are a lot of problems, there's sort of endemic problems with the copper, that is an area where you may put fibre right through that part of country. So you just make a rational business decision, a cost-effective business decision where you go. He also raised the matter of pair gains. Now, just very briefly, what a pair gain is where, in the past, Telstra has bought a number of copper lines out of its exchange to an electronic device which then multiplies those copper lines into more services. So you might have, for argument's sake, 20 coming into the electronic device and 80 going out. And he says, what about that? Well, the approach we're taking is perfect for that. It gives you a very, very quick solution, because what you do is you pull fibre through to where the pair gain device was, you put in your new electronic node, and immediately all the people connected to that have got very fast broadband. So this type of technology we're talking about is a very, very dramatic improver of people with pair gain. So that's apologise if that's a bit technical, but it's important to get that across, because there are a lot of people who have no broadband at all because they are on pair gains, and because of Labor's hopelessness and inability to actually deliver anything they talk about over the last 4 years have seen no improvement.
Let's just move over here, Malcolm. OK, are there any questions that people would like to ask?
What do you see as the lifespan of copper in the long term? I mean, how many years can we expect this investment in the copper infrastructure, or this reinvestment in the copper infrastructure, to last? You haven't sort of mentioned how far forward that will take for the amount of money that you're proposing to spend.
Well look, obviously all infrastructure has a lifespan. Copper has a lifespan, fibre has a lifespan. So all infrastructure does have a lifespan. All infrastructure over time has to be renewed. But there is no reason why most of the copper that's currently in place can't continue to be used. Where it can't continue to be used, obviously there will be a fibre rollout. Where it can continue to be used, we should make use of it. One of the real problems with Labor's version of the National Broadband Network is that it junks perfectly useful infrastructure. It junks useful copper. It junks useful HFC cabling, and we don't want to do this. We want to deliver people much, much faster broadband as quickly as we can, as affordably as we can, and that means full use of existing infrastructure.
Yeah, well, just let me add to that, because I think I know where you're coming from. When you roll out a fibre to the node network, you should always do so with a view to having the option of going fibre to the premise down the track. That might be 5 years' time, it might be 10 years' time, it might be 15 years' time, it might be never. But putting that additional fibre capacity out to the fibre distribution point is very cheap to do that. So that's how you provision fibre on demand, and it's how you provision upgrades. We've set this out in the background paper, the economics of this, but I can assure you that we are well aware of the need to preserve your optionality and flexibility in terms of network design.
But can you quantify in a number of years how long you expect the current copper infrastructure to be fit for purpose to deliver the sorts of broadband speeds that you say Australians commonly expect? Well, is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? No. Is it 15 years?
The answer to your question is nobody knows. Copper is delivering much faster speeds today with XDSL, ADSL, ADSL plus, VDSL, VDSL2 plus, VDSL2 plus with vectoring. All of these technologies are delivering dramatically higher speeds. You're getting over 100 megs on the copper that you so deride. You're getting speeds that are as high or higher than what the NBN is providing over fibre. And this is not me talking. This is, telcos around the world are delivering this. So the point is that in a rapidly evolving technology market with so much disruptive change, what you should do, a prudent person preserves as much flexibility and optionality as possible so that you make your investments to deliver the needs of your customers now and in the foreseeable future, preserving the flexibility to take advantage of technological developments as and when they emerge.
Okay. You say you've done a lot of analysis for this policy. Why don't you know how long the usable lifespan of copper is? Isn't that something you'd want to know?
But this is, look, can I say to you...
Isn't it something you want to know?
No, but what's the question? How long will a piece of copper last? It lasts thousands of years. You don't know. I mean, the physical...
So you don't know how long it's usable for?
No, just hang on a minute. The reality is there is copper in every network. There's copper in every device. There's copper everywhere in networks all around the world. The question is, how long, what you're really asking is, how long will copper be the medium for the last several hundred metres between the end of the fibre and the customer's premise? And the answer is, it may be a very long time, but it depends on the technological developments. Now, you may be a technological genius, and in which case you know, we could really do with your help, because I've never met anyone as clever as you appear to be, because you think you're able to know, or someone can say with certainty, what the technology will be 5 and 10 years hence. You don't know. Well, the answer is I'm knowledgeable enough and modest enough to know that you can't predict the future with great certainty. So what you do is you build in that flexibility, and you don't, you know, when Labor says they've got a technology that's future-proof, they are kidding themselves. Believe me, there is no technology that is future-proof. That's the one, if you haven't learnt that, you've been asleep for the last 20 years.
Well, no, not everyone's been asleep. Now, that's a very good leg glance, but it's quite nonsense. However, you said in announcing the policy you will commence a commercial review that will have 60 days to work out how quickly your national broadband network plan can be rolled out. You also announced that it will be rolled out by 2016. Please, can we have those two aims resolved? You can't know that you'll deliver it by 2016 if you need a commercial review to tell you.
Well, let me take that question. I can answer that. What we have made is, what we've got here is a policy that is very realistic, that we have researched very carefully, that we've discussed with people very knowledgeable in the field, people that are actually building new generation broadband networks, both here and internationally. So we haven't spent a lot of time. We've spent some time with academics. We've actually spent time with the men and the women that are really doing the work, that really know what they're talking about. They're the people I'd encourage every journalist here who's interested in this area to talk to. They are the most knowledgeable people. Now, we believe the goals here are very realisable. But what we are going to do, as Tony has said, immediately, the NBN Co will set out a realistic, objective assessment of how long it is going to take in dollars and time to complete the project on the current trajectory, on the current design, and then set out what savings can be achieved, both in dollars and time, by making changes of the kind that we've proposed. And indeed there are some other changes, because we didn't want to over-complicate our proposal. There are other changes of a much more technical nature that can also make some considerable savings. So that is the point of that is that will have the benefit of all of the NBN's experience and have access to that information. So I'm very confident that will confirm the reasonableness of what we've proposed.
And the 2016 target?
Just the gentleman here with the camera.
Can the Coalition confirm whether it's planning to make a return on investment from its $29.4 billion spent?
Well, what we're going to do is we are going to invest the money up to the $29.5 billion. We believe that is what it will take to get the national broadband network up and running and ready for sale. We think that what we've got in mind is necessary to rescue the national broadband network, which, as Malcolm has said, as shrewd observers like Henry Ergas have published, is currently on the point of collapse.
Hang on, just once. I just want to add something to that. This is a very important point. The revenues that the coalition NBN will be able to generate will be substantially the same, certainly no less than, the revenues the Labor NBN would be able to generate. And if you doubt me on that, as we've set out in the background papers, you can look at the test case, if you like, between AT&T's fibre to the node deployment and Verizon's fibre to the premises deployment in the United States, where the average revenue per user is essentially the same. And of course, one network cost a third to a quarter to build than the other. So the ARPUs will be very comparable in reality, and that is why our proposition, our approach, is much more likely to generate a positive return, let alone a commercial one. John McDougall.
Yes. So just to confirm, the funding remains off budget?
Well, it's off budget only in the sense that the investment doesn't go through the expenditure portion of the budget statements that we all focus on that deliver deficit or surplus. The public sector accounting treats this as a balance sheet item, and we don't have any plans to change that, and that's because it is a commercial investment. Now, our argument on this point has been that it is so plainly obvious that the amount of money the government is investing in this project is so far in excess of what the value of the project will be when completed, that they should be recognising the deficit in some manner. Now, whether you recognise that through the budget, in the way you would in a private sector company, through taking a loss through the P&L, is another question. But we're not proposing to change the budget treatment of this.
We think, John, that our NBN is a commercial proposition. Labor's NBN is not a commercial proposition. The other point I should make is that obviously there will be some savings to the budget because he won't be borrowing nearly as much. We estimate, depending upon the interest rate assumptions, we estimate about $750 million of savings over the forward estimates period.
Have you set a timeline or plan for selling the Coalition's NBN down the track?
Well, just as the government has said that eventually its NBN would be returned to the private sector, ours certainly ultimately will go back into the private sector, but it won't go into the private sector until it's ready for sale. At the moment, there is nothing to sell. What we need to do is produce an NBN which is saleable. If we are going to have the sort of respect for taxpayers that we need, we've got to produce something which is saleable.
It's not entirely an exaggeration, given the dreadful state this project is in and the time it'll take to get it fixed up. It's not entirely an exaggeration to say that its return to the private sector could be a high priority for Wyatt Roy's second term as Prime Minister.
You have to renegotiate the agreements with Telstra. Can you confirm that Telstra shareholders will be no worse off under...
Sorry, just say that again.
You'll have to renegotiate the agreements with Telstra to get access.
Yeah, absolutely. There would have to be some renegotiation with Telstra. We're very confident that can be achieved speedily, and we've set out the rationale for that in the policy documents.
Will Telstra shareholders be affected? Will they be no worse off?
Look, we understand and respect the need for Telstra shareholders to be kept whole, in the sense that Telstra's not going to do any deal if their shareholders are worse off. The approach we're taking is not bad news for Telstra. It's actually they'll be marginally better off, is what many analysts think. I noticed one of the broker's analysts said today that this approach would add, I think, 3 cents to the value of a Telstra share. So it's somewhere between a neutral and a mild positive. But certainly Telstra shareholders have got nothing to fear from our approach.
And the interesting thing, if I may add, is that Telstra only gets paid under the government scheme when the NBN connection becomes live. And there are very few live NBN connections right now. Under us, the thing will become operational vastly more quickly, so Telstra will start to get some money.
What happens to the Optus agreement?
Yeah, we've not assumed any change to the Optus agreement at all, so we've assumed that remains where it is. Optus's agreement, as you know, essentially relates to their HFC. Everything we've heard from Optus indicates that they want to be out of the HFC, so we've assumed, out of an abundance of caution, and the assumptions, as you'll see, are very conservative and prudent ones. We've just assumed no change to that.
Will you require Telstra and Optus to open up their HFC networks to wholesale? What we've said... Do you mind if I just...
Yeah, sure, mate.
This is getting into the footnotes. What we've said in terms of HFC networks is that were we to change the agreements with Telstra and Optus, which, as you know, basically require them to switch off... It's a shockingly anti-competitive agreement, by the way, which we've criticised extensively, as I'm sure you remember. But what the agreement says is that once a premise is connected to the NBN, then Telstra and or Optus cannot provide broadband services over their HFC. Now, that is extremely anti-competitive. It flies in the face of government policies in this country and every other country for several generations. But that is the agreement. We would like to unwind that and actually enable facilities-based competition, but but as we say in the document, we could only do that in circumstances where competition was enhanced, open access to that particular customer and market were preserved. So that is that's something that has to be negotiated, but it is I can assure you we find the approach of the NBN, the government with the NBN, quite extraordinary. This is a very important thing for all Australians to recognise. This policy is unique in the world. There is no government, not in China, not in North Korea as far as I'm aware even, that is actually building a new government-owned telecom monopoly and prohibiting anyone from competing with it. I mean, it is in every other country in the world where broadband networks are being built, governments seek to promote competition. And that, of course, was, that was Labor policy, it was our policy. So this approach of a great big new government-owned telecom monopoly is going back to the economics, truthfully, of the 1950s. This is skipping several generations, not just from the point of view of Tony's and my party, but from the point of view of the Labor Party. This is not... Paul Keating and Bob Hawke would never have done this.
Who will be doing the independent review? Who are you commissioned to do that, and will you abide by any recommendations they make if they conflict with your policy?
Look, it will be a fully independent review. It may be the Productivity Commission, although we're conscious of the fact that the Productivity Commission has a very heavy workload. It may be Infrastructure Australia, but one way or another, there will be a full independent review of telecommunications going forward, of broadband going forward, and that will obviously include a cost-benefit analysis, a published cost-benefit analysis of our version of the National Broadband Network.
But will you do a cost-benefit analysis of Labor's NBN? Because, Mr Turnbull, you hinted at it at the Kickstarter conference earlier this year. So will you do a cost-benefit analysis of the
big question... Yeah, the answer is yes. All of that will be examined. But, one of the... the answer is yes. The big question that needs to be answered is this. While we all accept there are very significant benefits from everyone having access to very fast broadband, that's why affordability is so important in our policy, and such a problem, lack of affordability, such an issue for Labor. While we accept there are great benefits, there is a real issue as to how much benefit is there, for example, in taking everybody from, say, 50 megs to potentially 150 or a gig. And the better view, and I've got very little doubt an inquiry would make this conclusion, the view around the world is that utility tends to flatten out because as you go higher and higher, the things you can do with that speed are less and less in a residential environment. And this is where, of course, our fibre on demand product is so valuable, so that if you imagine everyone in this studio is a house in a residential suburb, and we roll out the fibre to the node proposal, most people have got 40, 50 megs or better. Let's say there's a few people that have got 25 and a bit more, and everyone's happy with that. But there is one chap there who's an architect, and he has a practice in Shanghai, and he's working from home, and he's uploading and downloading huge files. Well, what you can do is say, all right, we will run a fibre to you. You give us a few $1,000s. This is what they do in the UK, a few £1,000 there, and then that person has got 1 gig symmetrical if they like. Now, that might be the only person in that suburb that actually needs it, but the good thing about this technology, this technological approach, is that it's very flexible. Now, if on the other hand you go to the local commercial park or industrial park, corporate park or something, well, of course you run fibre into there because you've got lots of customers wanting a lot of bandwidth. So it's this is very flexible. And by the way, all of these things I'm talking about now, whether it is fibre on demand, whether it is vectoring, were not in reality available, in some cases not even contemplated, when fibre to the node was last looked at seriously in this country 5 or 6 years ago.
And just if I may add something, I mean, at 25 megs, you can simultaneously be downloading 4 HD TV programs. So you can have 4 people in 4 different parts of the standard house watching the sport, a movie, whatever you might be doing. So we are absolutely confident that 25 megs is going to be enough, more than enough, for the average household.
Let's examine Telstra as a dependency for the commencement of your project in getting start dates some point after a September 2013 election and a target for 2016. You're taking a very optimistic assumption about how quickly you can deal with what is, among other things, as well as being our incumbent carrier, a company that is one of the biggest law firms in Australia. They have managed to delay every initiative that has been attempted since about 1996.
Can I make a few observations before throwing to Malcolm? First of all, we aren't interested in going to war with Telstra, and I think that's one of the problems that we've seen. Too much conflict between government and Telstra in the past. We want to work constructively and collegially with Telstra and the other telcos. That's the first point to make. The second point to make is that rolling out fibre to a few thousand nodes is obviously a vastly less daunting engineering undertaking than rolling out fibre to some 12 million households. That's why we are very confident that our NBN is deliverable in a way that Labor's NBN obviously is not.
Look, to give you an example in terms of speed, British Telecom will pass 19 million households. 19 million households.
Yes, but they are running a year later than their first announcement in 2009.
If you could model your civility on the rest of the journalists present.
Hell no.
Yeah.
No, but
all right.
British Telecom
okay, we'll take another question from someone.
Is running late by its own time.
We'll take someone else. Look, can I just correct that, gentleman? Look,
yes, they are.
what you said is completely wrong.
No,
British Telecom's
a 2014 date in 2009.
Please.
Now announce a 2015 date to reach 60%.
Well, British Telecom is running ahead there. I mean, I talk to British Telecom all the time, and my research with British Telecom is based on talking, as it is with most of these telcos, talking to the people that are actually doing the work, rather than reading bulletin boards and blogs. And I promise you, that right now they are passing 100,000 premises a week, and they will do pass 19 million premises in 3.5 years. Now, in 4 years, the Labor Party hasn't passed 100,000 premises. Please.
Mr Turnbull, you're right. British Telecom is doing that. But and really, it's only globally incumbent telcos like British Telecom that has been able to do that. The coalition has made a great deal of the fact that the Australian government is the only government globally to be rolling out fibre to the home. But won't the coalition government be the only government rolling out fibre to the node globally?
If I can answer, Tony. Look, the answer is you're right. You know, but I tell you, we are in the position of the guy that is going touring in Ireland and gets lost in one of those little country lanes and goes into the Irish pub and asks for directions. And the barman, with the generosity and helpfulness and kindness for which the Irish are famous, says to him, well, sir, if I were you, I wouldn't be starting from here. And the truth is we wouldn't be starting from here either. So the government shouldn't be building this. Every other country in the world that I can think of has taken the approach of getting the industry, the private sector to do it, and provided some degree of subsidy for the non-commercial, non-economic areas. That was a choice the government should have taken. It was their original policy, remember, in 2007. They abandoned this for this great scheme. So Tony and I are inheriting the NBN Co, but we're not about just moaning and groaning about the bad decisions made preceding it. What we are going to do is get this job done, and we will bring very fast broadband to all Australians sooner, cheaper and more affordably. We would not have gone about it this way, and there will be billions of dollars that Labor has wasted that we cannot recover. but we will save many billions of dollars, at least $60 billion, by taking the approach we've described in this policy.
Yeah, and could I just say in conclusion that I do want to urge all of you to read the documents that we've released today, particularly the background paper, which is a very comprehensive document and, as you will see from it, a very thoroughly researched document. But I also want to say that you've heard today from a Shadow Minister for Communications who is obviously on top of this subject in a way that the Minister for Communications clearly isn't. Malcolm was one of Australia's internet pioneers, as one of the founders of Aussie Mail, and I'm confident that in the years to come Malcolm is going to be Mr Broadband, and that an incoming coalition government can finally bring Australia into the broadband world, into the digital world. I'm very confident that we can do that, and I'm very proud to be associated with this policy this morning. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thanks,
well
Tony.
done, mate. Thank you so much. Thank you.